We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Thursday, April 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're joining us on News Generation. Joining us this Thursday is Cheska Dainha.
Happy Thursday, everyone!
Happy
Woohoo!
Thursday! And Julian Kim.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. We're going to begin our show with our keyword news. Our keyword for today is decision. South Korea's Constitutional Court is set to deliver its verdict on the impeachment motion against President Yoon Suk-yeol on Friday once again. The court will deliver the ruling at 11 a.m. Korea time, and a live broadcast of the session has been allowed. This comes after months of hearings and deliberation following President Yoon's declaration of martial law on December 3rd, 2024. And this marks only the third impeachment trial of a sitting president in Korean history and the longest one to date. And since December, the country has been mired in political turmoil, with the political circle sharply divided and protests continuing for months, as you can see on the screen. So now that the court's long-awaited decision is just a day away, what are your thoughts on this moment of reckoning?
Yeah, so this really would have a huge historic impact for South Korea, and the decision that comes from it will have lasting impacts for who knows how long. But we can clearly see within the last couple of months with the political turmoil and the ongoing protests just how much really is at stake here and how divided people in Korea are on this issue. And this result is something that people both domestically and internationally are paying close attention to. So we'll see how things will go tomorrow. And personally for me, I can't lie, I am nervous about the results. I've been avoiding all the government spots in Seoul just because of the ongoing protests, because I am worried about the safety, and also transportation has been heavily impacted there too.
And these are all part of the heightened security measures that the government has put in place because they expect a massive protest to take place near the Constitutional Court and the presidential compound tomorrow. So I also want to ask your take on this historic ruling, Cheska.
Yeah, I agree with Julian. I honestly can't believe it's already been 4 months. It's one of the longest decision-making process. And I guess that also goes to show how difficult this decision was in the process of making. But most importantly, I think once the decision comes out, that people are really safe and that we really hasten, regardless of what the decision is, we hasten to get our career back in a stabilized mode, because I know there have been frequent protests and people livelihood that have suffered from a lot from awaiting this decision. So I do hope that, you know, Korea finds a stabilization once again pretty quickly.
I totally agree, because the past 4 months were really hectic. Many people say they don't even remember how we said goodbye to 2024 and said hello to 2025. So hopefully peace and stability.
Exactly, and I know a lot of people's livelihood have been affected, whether they work in news or journalism or just daily lives.
And business owners, which we talked about on NewsGen before. All right, so we'll have to wait for the Constitutional's ruling tomorrow morning. And that was our keyword news for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Today we've chosen a topic that most of us never seem to get enough of and always wish we had more. That is sleep. Take a look at the screen to find out more. Do you keep track of how many hours you sleep each night? Sure, it probably fluctuates depending on your workload, social plans, or whether something interesting caught your attention on YouTube or social media. But overall, the latest data shows that South Koreans are clocking in significantly less sleep than people in many other countries. So we're going to start off on a light note today. What time did you go to bed last night? And on average, how many hours do you usually sleep?
I know it's a very light question, but it doesn't come as lightly to me. Because I love today's topic because it affects me quite heavily, because I actually suffer from insomnia a lot. Before, yeah, so it varies, but I really try my best to get minimum of 6 and maximum a good 8 hours, because I know how much sleep affects my quality of the day, whether it be physical or psychological. So I'm quite fit for today's topic because I am one of the MZs that are suffering and struggling terribly with good sleeping, and I also know the consequences.
They're so severe. It impacts your day after, right?
Not just day after, but even during, before, and after. Yeah, for sure.
So we're gonna talk about this in the latter part of the show. But now I also want to ask the same question to Julian.
Yeah, so I unfortunately went to bed at 2 a.m. last night. It was really frustrating because I went to bed at 12 a.m. I said I wanted to get an average of 7 hours of sleep last night, but it's just one of those nights where I was just laying in bed. It wasn't even because I was actually staring at my phone. It's because I just could not sleep. But as a general rule of thumb for me, I try to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep because if I get any less than that, I struggle the next day. I struggle really hard unless I get a cup of coffee. But if my schedule is more busy, I get maybe average about 5 to 6 hours.
5 to 6 hours. All right.
And what about you, Eugene?
Well, I think for a weekday, I think I sleep somewhere between 5 to 6 hours, but I try to get additional sleep that I didn't have during the weekday. So I think I sleep about 9 to 10 hours during the weekend.
Gotcha. You compensate for the lack of sleep that you've got.
Yeah, I compensate for the lack of sleep I get on the weekday. So going back to our discussion today, here in Korea, we're used to hearing that resting well is just as important as working hard or studying hard because sleep isn't just downtime. I think Cheska kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's kind of like the fuel that powers our minds and bodies for the day ahead. So I want to ask you, what's the most recent data on the average sleeping time of South Koreans?
And I love that you phrased it as a fuel because you're definitely preaching to the choir and people like me when you say it's the golden hour to fuel and recover. But unfortunately, and it might have to do with perhaps Korea's like hardworking or hustle culture, sleep hours here in Korea are actually less than the average. So let's take a look at the screen to see the actual numbers. Now, according to Korean Sleep Research Society, the average sleep time for Koreans are about 6 hours and 58 minutes, which is, as you can see from the graph, about 18% less than the OECD average of just over 8 hours. Now, on average, Koreans sleep around 11 and wake up around 6 a.m., but I don't think any of us actually fall into that category. And only 7% of people actually get like a good quality sleep on a daily basis, which is only half of the global average of about 13%. And when I talk about like good sleep, I think especially when you are modern, human society trying to slave away the days at work, it's really hard to get like full recovery and that full, deep, delicious sleep. I think it's just impossible to do on a daily basis.
Right. So to kind of sum up the data that Cheska mentioned, the average sleeping time of people in South Korea is about 6 hours and 58 minutes, a little less than 7 hours. But we're now going to zoom into our generation, the younger generation. So Julian, are younger people getting more sleep than this average, or is it the other way around?
Now, so millennials and Gen Zers in Korea are generally getting a lot less sleep than average. The average sleep generation for a generation is typically 5 hours and 49 minutes. And more than 80% of millennials and Gen Zers are actually going to sleep after midnight too.
I see. And I think that this is no surprise because based on our answers, I think none of us really sleeps about 6 hours and 58 minutes, which is the average, maybe closer to the average of younger generations, right?
The 5 hours, and was it 48?
5 hours and 49 minutes.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So once again, according to the data, Koreans sleep about an hour and a half less than the OECD average. And we want to mention that this is a very, very big gap because every precious minute matters, especially in the morning. So I also want to ask you, what do you think are the main culprits behind Korean so-called sleep deficit?
Yeah, so there are many factors that are in play when it comes to our generation's sleep deficits. Many people sacrifice sleep to study, look for jobs, working on career transitions, or even taking on side hustles too. And additionally, since the average commute time is 70 minutes, that eats away the precious minutes we can sleep in the morning too. So it makes us wake up earlier too. So many of us millennials and Gen Zers just they choose to delay sleep just to carve out personal time. And there's this phenomenon called revenge bedtime procrastination. And it basically means that people delay their sleep to enjoy their own personal leisure time and take back that time from the day to themselves too. And additionally, using smartphones before we go to sleep have become,
like a habit?
Yes, part of our bedtime routine and our habit. Many of us spend time that is supposed to be spent sleeping on platforms such as TikTok and YouTube or other forms of OTT platforms consuming all sorts of content. And many of us have that question always in our head, just one more video before I sleep. And that question
that piles up to like hours, right?
Yes, unfortunately, it adds to hours and it makes us just sleep a lot later, makes us wake up a lot more groggier and more tired, adding this vicious cycle that's really, really hard to get out of. And on top of that, the blue light emitted from our smartphones is really a negative impact on our circadian rhythm and affects our sleep quality too.
Right. So less sleep equates to not detrimental, but less sleep equates to health implications. It could
Exactly.
because of the blue light and obviously getting less amount of sleep will definitely not be good for your health.
Yeah, I would even say sometimes very detrimental depending on how severe it gets.
Right, right, definitely. So I want to ask you, Cheska, can you relate to what Julia mentioned? What are your thoughts on this?
I usually, before I go, I love how you mentioned that every precious minute matters
Yes,
in the morning.
it does.
I would even go so far as every second matters, because when you're trying to wake up from not so good sleep, and you're feeling groggy and exhausted, like Julian said, I think every second, every minute counts. But I also want to add my own personal testimonial about what Julian said, the revenge bedtime. I would even call it compensation. So what I mean is when we have this really busy and hectic schedule, whether at work or during the day, when it comes to night, I think psychologically we feel like we want to compensate ourselves for all the hard work that we did, that we didn't get this personal time. So what we end up doing is we either eat, we either go on social media
or watch YouTube or streaming services.
Exactly. We do all these things just to compensate and feel something that we didn't get to feel during the busy day. The unfortunate downside is that it has the effect on the sleep quality. And to go deeper into the psychological components, anxiety and depression also affect or cause insomnia, and actually vice versa. And this is probably the most common and global, especially anxiety and uncertainty about the future, which is terrible for good sleep. I think we've all had those moments when we're just laying in bed thinking and unable to shut off our minds, and the clock is just ticking and you just don't know how to fall back into sleep. And I think also sometimes it can be physical. People have like breathing problems. And here in South Korea, 1 in 3 Koreans actually suffer from insomnia and are actually seeking treatment. So most importantly, there have been countless research done by how lack of sleep, as Julian mentioned, can affect relationships and even cause mental disorder or sort of exacerbate mental illness, and as well as decision-making process on a normal daily basis. I think we've all had those days when we didn't get enough caffeine or didn't wake up enough. We're really mean to our colleagues.
You get super grumpy and sensitive.
Yeah,
right?
we're not as kind to other people, and I think that can all be very much affected by sleep as well.
So lack of quality sleep takes a toll both on your physical and mental health.
And personal relationships as well.
All right, so time to listen to our viewers. We also asked them what's stopping them from getting a good night's sleep by running a poll on the Arirang YouTube channel. So if you look at the poll results, 53% chose stress, followed by screen time before bed, a packed schedule, and caffeine. And here's what 3 of them had to share. Our first comment for this Thursday is by Yay88. As an office worker, I always lose sleep when I have work-related stress. I think stress is really the source of all kinds of illnesses. Never Ever X7C says stress from job seeking and gaming has been keeping me awake at night, preventing me from getting a good night's sleep over the past several months. I hope things will work out soon. Benny D97 says, for me, screen time before bed is a big reason I don't sleep well. I often stay up chatting with friends, and while it's nice to stay connected, it definitely affects our sleep. So I think the big question now is what qualifies as a good night's sleep, and what kind of a toll can sleep deprivation take on our health more specifically? And we'll get the answers to those questions by chatting with a health expert after the break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Welcome back. Today we're pleased to welcome Dr. Pamela Song, Associate Professor of Neurology at Inje University College of Medicine. Welcome to the show, Dr. Song.
Hi, everybody. This is Pamela Song.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, Doctor. So, Doctor, we first want to ask you, based on what we heard earlier, South Koreans seem to be sleeping less than the global average. So, what do you think, what kind of impact does chronic sleep loss have on our physical and mental health?
Yes, you're right. South Koreans are getting less sleep than the global average. OECD, like you said, about 6 hours per night. But studies based on the wearable device reports about 4.5 hours for Koreans, which is more alarming. We don't exactly know how this pattern started, but it's now also a cultural norm for most Koreans, not to mention screen time, like you mentioned, before bedtime, which makes everything worse.
Doctor,
So think about how deeply
Please
would
continue.
you be worried about your friends or colleagues who sleep 5 to 6 hours? I guess not, based on how you guys were talking just before, because we all are sleeping less. But the accumulation of sleep deprivation is widespread and it should be without proper concern. I really want to emphasize that insufficient sleep do come with health consequences, even it's not so obvious the next day. We all have those nights when we stayed up too late. Probably you also have this experience that if you stay up late, awake for night, I mean, you might miss a Zoom meeting the next day. It shouldn't be, but forget to pick up groceries on your back home, snap at someone more easily, or notice your jogging performance isn't quite the same. These little things don't seem like a big deal at first, but they're all signs that your body and brain are running low. When you consistently sleep short, sleep debt builds up. The more you sleep deprive yourself, it will eventually affect every bit of you in the long run. So chronic sleep loss, in a medical wise, it will increase the risk of hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, and even weakens immunity. And it is crucial for brain health because it does wash out waste products we produce during the daytime. So sleep is essential to protect long-term cognitive decline. Mentally, like you have mentioned, that it will impact your mental health, which will aggravate or make you prone to anxiety, depression, irritability, and it can aggravate burnout. What normally people are very concerned about memory function, but it does ruin your memory. And also it gives you emotional instability. So sleep duration itself only isn't the whole story for sleep health, but it's the most basic starting point to measure. So I cannot emphasize less to maintain regular and optimal sleep time.
And Doctor, I completely agree with you because as someone who is suffering from something so similar, I can definitely relate. So I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question. What advice do you have for people who are struggling with falling asleep?
Yes, it has both ways. So it is frustrating when you have difficulty sleeping, but it is also difficult when you fall asleep when you shouldn't be. So this kind of mismatch between when you want to sleep and when you can is something many people experience. Keeping a regular sleep schedule can be a very important point, unless you're dealing with sleep disorders, in which case I strongly recommend you to visit sleep specialist. Bedtime is something most healthy individuals can, I should say, actively manage. But this voluntary control of sleep time is often misplanned. So these days, it's increasingly common to see people voluntarily delaying their sleep, which maybe applies for your cases also. It is known as revenge bedtime procrastination,
Yes.
which people sacrifice their sleep to claim their personal time they have been missing during the daytime. Maybe because they were busy or it was just too stressful, but this is the only time of their own. So they like to enjoy this time just by sacrificing their sleep. This is especially common among students, professionals, and caregivers who feel that late at night is their only free time. However, consistently shifting sleep schedule can lead to chronic sleep deprivation. That's why setting your sleep time and sticking to your plan can be a simple but powerful step towards better sleep.
Great, Dr. Song. Thank you so much for your response. Just to wrap things up, what is one thing people should avoid if they want to have better sleep?
There are a lot of strategies, but if I have to pick one, I should say, for those who want to sleep better at night, it is easy to focus only what happens at bedtime. But on the other hand, daytime may need special attention as well, because it actually plays a huge role. Sleep and wakefulness need to be in balance, not just in duration, but also in quality. So to improve sleep, it's important to stay active during the day, to avoid sedentary lifestyle, or limit prolonged indoor time, and be cautious with excessive napping. Engage in physical or mental stimulating activities help build up what we call sleep pleasure, which can increase with intensity and duration of active wakefulness. So my last advice can be stay awake during daytime to sleep better at night.
All right, Dr. Song, thank you so much for your great advice today, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've all heard the golden rule from experts, which is aiming for 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. But with their fast-paced lives and jam-packed schedules, it's often easier said than done. So ending off our show today, what are some realistic tips for people who want to squeeze in a bit more rest or just sleep better?
I think it's so important, but just to wrap up really quickly, I think mindset is really important. There's a great book called Rest by Alex Susan Kim Pang, and in it there's a quote that says, your non-working hours determine how you function during your working hours.
That's so true.
Right? And as Dr. Song mentioned, how we stay during the day, I think affects how we sleep. So in that sense, in this hustle, busy, crazy, hectic life, I think we have to be meticulous and strategic about how we treat those non-working hours or non-sleeping hours in order to sleep better.
So always keeping that in mind. What do you suggest, Julian?
Yeah, so going off of what Jessica just said, I personally really believe in investing time towards self-care. I'm sure that many of us can relate to, but we spend most of our days overstimulated, whether it's just because of our daily responsibilities or simply just because we have access to a smartphone too. So that's why I think it's really important to allocate time towards decompressing and letting your brain rest by doing nothing. There's actually this term called therapeutic laziness, which was actually selected as a key word of the year in the United Kingdom. And it refers to the act of intentionally doing nothing and resting for recovery for both the mind and the body. It's a new form of self-care that is gaining a popularity amongst our generation especially, and for those who are struggling with burnout and anxiety. And I think this will be beneficial for many of us, especially in Korea, who are experiencing burnout, exhaustion, anxiety too.
Right. Sometimes doing less can be more helpful for your health. And that's all we have for today, but Newsden will be back next Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. We're off tomorrow as Arirang News will bring you special live coverage of the Constitutional Court's ruling on the impeachment motion against President Yoon Suk-yeol that will begin at 10:40 a.m., so please tune in. And special thanks to Jessica Dainhong.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in throughout the week, and we'll be waiting for you here Monday morning. We are
News Generation.